The speakers of the next session, Honorable Justice Dr. Adil Omar Sharif, Deputy Chief Justice of the Supreme Constitutional Court of Egypt,
wherein we are not supposed to deliver a lecture, a formal lecture. Rather, we are more into having ongoing dialogue with the students themselves, exploring a specific issue, and elaborate on that. And in that sense, I'm not really intending to deliver a formal lecture. Rather, I would give the floor to the students themselves to interact with me based on an introduction that I'm about to make, and allowing them the floor afterwards to engage in this sort of interactive dialogue. But first of all, I have to convey my thanks to the organizers for putting up this excellent meeting and allowing all of us to take part of it. I'm also very grateful to the Gandhi's family for providing their unlimited support to the international judicial community, and therefore all of us have had the opportunity to get together and interact with one another. At this stage, I'm really very much reminded with sadness.
The global warming and climate change, I knew nothing about it when I was your age. There was no question of global warming at that point of time. I was born in a small valley of Arauli, where 100 meters from my house, the tigers would come for drinking waters. All the wildlife was there. We had the thick forest of custard apples and cranberries and red berries. We used to have all our hands punched with these thorns of the berries when we'll go and pick up in the recess period, because there will be no canteens in the... I am talking of 1936-37, when I was barely 4 or 5 years. I am now 85 years of age. Therefore, you can understand, in this country, there was no question of consideration whether what is global warming and what is climate change. What we have to share with you is only an experience of our life, if we can. Because I know it, that information and knowledge which you possess has to be blended with the experience of us, and the two combined alone can bring the wisdom personification in you. I had been listening to the words of wisdom which were given by Jagdish Gandhi this morning, and when you are talking of humanism, I think I had no words after that to admire that speech. That one of the finest which I ever heard. And I was reminded of what Daniel Webster had once said: if you work on marble, it will be effaced. If you work on marble, it will be effaced. If you engrave on brass, it will be defaced. If you rear temples, churches and mosques, they will crumble into dust. But if you imbue your noble thoughts, with sincerity and devotion, and for the humanity, you engrave on that tablet which brightens till eternity. And the words of wisdom which are being said by Mr. Jagdish Gandhi this morning are the words which are engraved on that tablet of eternity, which should ever be remembered. And if that is remembered, then humanism is first and foremost an answer to all the problems in the world. When he was pointing out to all the charts and he came to ultimately human, I am reminded of few of words from a poem of one of my close friends who is no more now. They died last year, Mr. Mardul Murdul, a prominent lawyer. He was a poet also. He said, Yug thake thake nahi manushya ki parampara. Yug thake thaki nahi manushya ki parampara. Mit manushya ne nahi isliye racha jagat. कि तुम उसे मिटा चलो वह रहे निहारता शत्रु मनुष्य को शत्रु मनुष्य के, सावधान हो रहो, मिट गया मनुष्य पर मनुष्य तो नहीं मरा, मनुष्य के लिए बनी मनुष्य की परंपरा. If you follow that paramparas, if you do that, then everything will be immortal. There should be humanism in you, and that is the first of life. And therefore I said that your intelligence and knowledge has to be blended with my experience. आप ही के प्रदेश के एक शायर हैं उदयवीर सिंह. पार्लियामेंट में उन्होंने एक शेर पढ़ा, आप लोगों के लिए बहुत मौजू है इसलिए कह रहा हूं. उन्होंने कहा कि पुरानी कश्ती को पार लेकर फकत मेरा हुनर गया है. पुरानी कश्ती को पार लेकर फकत मेरा हुनर गया है. नए खिवैये ये न समझे कि नदी का पानी उतर गया है. Therefore, I'll not bore you with what, because you have every knowledge in your palm top. I admire the patience you have that you had been listening from us in the morning. You will find out all what I have to say if you read the speech of Salil Chaudhary delivered last week in the United Nations. He delivered a speech on last a week earlier. Mr. Salil Chaudhary, he is the president of the Amnesty International, and his speech is a wonderful speech on global warming and climate change, and gives a roadmap for the Paris Convention. Because it all ultimately comes to the question of human rights, violation of human rights. Because the moment you are encouraging the global warming, you are encroaching upon the human rights of the people. Ultimately you go to the same. Therefore, whatever questions you have to ask, you can ask me the question. I'll not bore you any further in my speech. Rest assured. Because I know had I been your place, I would have started clapping in between. And it would have been an indication, kindly sit down, we are tired. I'm sure you are not tired. So you ask the questions, I'll answer them. So far as the subject is concerned, you can very well know about the subjects. I don't have to say it, except if you want, I can say what is the road map which has been prepared and what we are saying, and India is going to place in the Paris Convention. I ascribed few lines about it. If you, it says everyone desires the United Nations Climate Change Summit in Paris this December to succeed. Everyone also agrees what succeed would look like meaningful reduction of carbon emission growth by the world between 2021 and 2030. INDC is the government's climate change plan has set 2030 targets, reducing the carbon intensity of its economy by 33 to 35%, increasing the renewable components of its installed electricity production to 40%, and using forestation to suck 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon. I wish it becomes a reality. Government of India is dedicated to sustainable energy consumption. It means India's commitment that will be credible, and it can be claimed India has done and is doing its fair share when it comes to climate change despite relative poverty. The INDC release here highlights the basic concern. Is India ready to tough negotiation that will take place in Paris? China made a similar announcement last November and has been lobbying. Since India will start now, INDC has left chinks in the country's climate negotiating armor. It makes out a case for foreign assistance in technology, but does not provide a roadmap how it would use such aid to reach its goal. Friends, I had been championing the cause for establishment of international tribunal for looking into the violation of the cases of human rights which comes out of global warming and climate change, because the International Court of Justice is not looking into this aspect. Therefore, separate tribunal, an international tribunal on the subject is a must, is the need of the hour, and if that is done, the tears of the millions of the people in the developing countries will be wiped out. Thank you very much.
May I invite the students who would like to ask questions, so please come up on the stage.
Engage.
Respected sir, I have a question for you. That when I was a child, I was see that car registration number was in single digits. Now today, this double digits are also going to end. So, is there any legal procedure by which we can?
It's a question of self-restraint. The ball is in your court. Whether you would like to ride a cycle or whether you would like to ride a car. If there are no purchasers where manufacturers will go. It's a mindset that, and it has become virtually a mad race for people that some of them purchases 20 cars, 30 cars, 15 cars. That is in their garage. Now that is against the humanity. What can be the procedure? There can be no procedure except a self-restraint on the persons.
So we can develop new technologies. India is developing so fast. We can develop new technologies.
That's the electricity car has come now. That we should shift it from the diesel and petrol to the electricity car. Possibly that, but that again will be energy consumption. There will be energy consumption. You know, our country has a very limited area. We are surrounded by sea on 3 sides and Himalayas on 1. On the top, Vindhyachal in between, Satpura ranges, Aravalli ranges, Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, all these Nilgiri hills, very limited land left for agriculture purposes. The widening of the roads will go on like that mad race. And if the cars will occupy the place, I don't think we will have anything to eat in this country.
So that they can go onto the international field. So as I thought about this competitive environment, because you will realize that there's space for only so many stars and no more. So there is going to be a lot of competition for the places for persons to go overseas to represent us on an international level. So I was reflecting on that situation and the extent of the competition, and I wondered about the rights of these children. And I would ask you to join with me and consider that. Because I said to myself, what rights do these children actually have as they strive to display their talents? They all have, or most of them have parents there, anxious parents who want them to excel. So I said to myself, should any of these anxious, proud parents be allowed to keep the children out of school in order to send them to practice to run fast, to run as fast as Usain Bolt, so that some young child in India would get to know their name? Should the parent do that? But I said further, what about the people who train these children? Those trainers also have an interest in the children excelling. Should they, the trainers, have a right to let the children take drugs that will enhance their performance? Those are questions I pose to myself, and I would invite you to think about them. Do these children have the right to go to school and pursue their academic careers without being interrupted because they show that they can run well? Do they have the right to remain in school? Or do they have the right, if they choose, to put aside all their academic career and focus instead on the athletic world? Because there is a lot of financial success to be had and a lot of money. So these are questions that I pose to myself about the rights of a child in that situation. Now, in general, I have to share with you that the rights of the child in Jamaica start with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, in which states certain rights which every child must be guaranteed. But even before that, Jamaica was involved in protecting the rights of the Jamaican child. And we have the Children, Guardianship and Custody Act, which says that what must be of concern, if in the consideration of custody of a child, what must be of concern is the welfare of the child, not the wishes of the parents, not the wishes of the children. But when we are concerned with determining the custody of a child, what is important is the child's welfare. That is first and foremost the consideration. We have other legislation called the Status of Children, which is concerned with fairness towards the children, and that one is concerned with children who are born outside of wedlock. And that entitles a child who was born from parents who are not married to inherit property from the father, even though their parents were not married. Before that act was passed, that could not happen. So we have been concerned about the rights of the child, and there are several laws in Jamaica to protect the children. But it must be noted that the rights of the child are guaranteed in our Constitution, which is the Supreme Court of the land. So the Supreme Court recognizes that our children have rights which must be respected. With regard to the United Nations Convention, of which we are a signatory, there the convention bans all forms of discrimination against the child, and the best interest of the child is what guides every decision that we make. So, my family, as we reflect on the questions I asked you to think about earlier concerning a child's right to pursue what he or she wishes, as opposed to what their parents or caregivers wish, let us bear in mind that no matter how enthusiastic a child may be about charting his own career, or how much aptitude the child has for a particular activity, when he is a child, he has no right to make the choice as to the activities he pursues. That's in our country. It's not that the child is in bondage, but rather the framers of our Constitution base the laws on the presumption that parents are concerned with the best interest of the child. Unfortunately, the reality is that not all parents are as pure in their motives as we would wish them to be. So I ask this question: does a child who is unhappy with choices made for him by a parent have the right to disobey his parent? The answer seems to be no. But then you will ask me, but what is in the best interest of the child? What if the child knows what's in the best interest of himself? And when you ask that question, I pause to remind us of a few instances where there have been children who claim to have been forced by their parents to do what they had no desire to do. One such person that I can remember is the famous Michael Jackson, the United States pop star. Do you know him or of him? Michael Jackson? Yes? All right. He is one of the persons that I can remember. When he became popular, he condemned his father for having forced him to work too hard at being a singer. He condemned his father for forcing him to practice so that he could excel and become the singer that he was. He did not want to practice the way his father said he should, but he obeyed his father. But when he became an adult, he spoke out about it and said that his father had done him wrong. Well, his father's response to that was, Michael had only succeeded because of what he, the father, had forced him to do. So this is a matter that will be open to much discussion, whether a child has a right to refuse to do what a person says he should do, or whether what the parent says is correct. Because in the case of Michael Jackson, had the father not forced him to do that, we would never have heard of a Michael Jackson. So the burning question is, what action is really in the best interest of the child? Now, the law also recognizes that parents and guardians have an obligation to ensure that the welfare of the child is given adequate attention, and to reduce instances where persons and parents in general want to shirk their responsibilities. And the welfare of the child, we know, is important. It is paramount. And maybe this is a good place for me to ask you to think about whether a country's customs or special laws concerning the rights of children would affect the enforceable world law and global governance that we have spoken about. For example, in Jamaica, the Maintenance Act makes it mandatory for both parents to provide for their unmarried child under the age of 18 once they are capable of doing that. And we have the Child Care and Protection Act, which goes further and says that the person who has responsibility for maintaining the child must provide the child with food, clothing, lodging, and health care. No doubt there are countries where parents do not have to maintain their children until 18 years of age. Differences like that would have to be resolved before moving to global governance. And I consider some other differences. One is perhaps the attitude of men towards children. In some societies, men are respected. Men respect the fact that they become fathers and honor their children. In other societies, they do not. And so laws have to be made to force men to honor their obligations. So these are matters which would be of interest and of importance in dealing with a global governance situation, because some countries would not need to provide for laws in this area, whereas there are others who would have to. Now, the criminal justice system is designed also in our country to deal with young offenders, and they have to get special treatment. The Child Care and Protection Act says that all persons with knowledge that a child is being harmed or is likely to be harmed must report that to a children's registry, which is kept in a government department. This duty to report a child who is being harmed is particularly placed on doctors and on school principals. And I ask you to consider those circumstances also in different societies which do not require that. Would that be accepted internationally? In setting up a world parliament, care would have to be taken to accommodate differences in cultures regarding, for example, forcing people to give information on children who are suffering. The age at which a person can marry in Jamaica is 16, but that age may be 12 in another country, or it might be 21 in a third country. So here again, there must be the matter of compromise. So no doubt every country wants to protect its children, but what we have to accommodate is differing approaches of countries to the way in which they protect the child. We are aware that children sometimes come into conflict with the law and have to face the judicial system as accused persons. And we say that no child is to be held in the same jail or lockups as an adult, and no child is to be interviewed by a police officer unless in the presence of an adult. These, my family, these are just some circumstances of differences in customs and in laws. What happens in other countries, in one country, may not happen in another. And the World Parliament would have to be mindful of different standards regarded as being acceptable as it creates laws that are acceptable to all countries in the world. We as Jamaican judges have a heightened awareness of the special needs of children, and I believe judges worldwide would have that heightened awareness, because it is our children who will grow up and continue with the traditions that we have taught. They represent our treasured human capital, and we respect them for that. I believe that we all agree that a world parliament would result in a much better world. However, as we strive towards that, we must remind ourselves to be careful to address our minds to differences in cultures and in the laws of individual countries and seek compromises for the greater good. It was Mahatma Gandhi, the very wise son of India, who said, "Good travels at a snail's pace. Those who want to do good are not selfish. They are not in a hurry. They know that to impregnate people with good requires a long time." So said Mahatma Gandhi. So we know that changes in attitudes and laws will take time. But nonetheless, we cannot rest on our laurels. As we go forward, we have to secure the rights of the children. They cannot protect themselves. As our popular singer Bob Marley said, "Get up, stand up for your rights. Get up, don't give up the fight." Let us stand up and fight for the rights of our children, whilst at the same time seeking to unite the world for the sake of the children. One love.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And now, children, it's your turn to ask questions. Will you kindly line up and come up on stage very briskly, promptly with your questions for ma'am to answer them? Very good.
The right to education is among the most widely recognized rights. How can the judiciary improve the national legislation so that the government obligation provide high quality education to all its children without discrimination?
The judiciary must enforce the laws that exist. For the most part, countries recognize that children need to have education. It only augurs well for the world. What we have to ensure is that the judges that we put to sit on the benches really have earned the right to do so. A judge who has earned the right to sit as a judge will do the right thing to enforce the laws that already exist in most countries to allow for a better education. So it really rests on the judges doing the right thing, and also on the lawyers bringing cases to court in instances where they see wrongs occurring.
Ma'am, what do you think turns a young and an innocent child into a terrorist?
What a question. This is something that gives me sleepless nights, because the young child is born innocent, waiting for love. It has to be the experiences between that early stage and the terrorist stage. In my own view, it has to be something that was lacking in the family. And by family, I don't mean mother, father, sister, brother. I mean the family in the village. Something was omitted that caused that innocent child to look elsewhere to get attention. Because in my view, many of the terrorists are really seeking attention. And so if we as family embrace our young innocent children, I do believe that would have an impact on reducing those children who choose that route.
Thank you, ma'am.